Hi, Mr. C here. Once again, I've got my W.I.T.S badge on and my W.I.T.S bracelet on here. If you've got yours, you could put yours on as well. We're going to do a W.I.T.S book. Remember, W.I.T.S stands for Walk Away, Ignore, Talk It Out, and Seek Help. And today's book is called Herb, the Vegetarian Dragon. Okay, before we get started with Herb, the Vegetarian Dragon, let's do some pre-reading questions. Now you may want to pause the video here so that you have time to talk about the questions and answer the questions before we move on to the next one. So, question number 1. What kind of words and things do we think about when we think of dragons? What is a vegetarian? Is Herb a suitable name for a dragon? What do dragons usually eat? What might be a problem that's going to happen in this story? And based on what you see on the front cover of the book, what do you think the story might be about? Here's Herb. What are these guys back here? All right, let's get started on the story. One more thing just before we get started on Herb the Vegetarian Dragon is I did film it sideways because the storybook was so large in size, so you may need to turn your iPad to be able to read it better. Herb the Vegetarian Dragon. Every dragon in the forest of Nogard was a meat-eater. Meathook was their leader. In the middle of the forest of Nogard stood Castle Dark. There was nothing Meathook liked better than to raid the castle at night with his friends. He particularly liked the sweet taste of royal princesses, and the crispy crunch of brave knights was almost as delicious. But one dragon was different. While Meathook and his friends sat in his cave planning their next raid, Herb was happy to tend his vegetable patch. He grew turnips and tomatoes, leeks and lettuces, cauliflowers and carrots. He grew peas and parsnips, red and yellow peppers, potatoes, and parsley. For Herb was a vegetarian. Late one night, the brave knights held a meeting at Castle Dark. Bernard the Bold was their leader. The time had come to rid our forest of the fearful dragons who raid our castles, devour our people, eat all of the best wild boar meat, Bernard declared. We must plan a great hunt. Death to the dragons, the knights shouted. Now listen carefully. The king has decreed that each dragon must be captured alive. Alive? Grumbled the knights. Why alive? Alive because the dragons we find are to walk the plank into the moat of Castle Dark for all to see. Hip, hip, hooray! Shouted the knights. Suddenly a rush of air and the sound of wings beating brought the knights to attention. Through the windows of the high stone walls they saw a monstrous dragon flying away in front of the full moon. A dragon spy! Cried Bernard. The dragons met in a huge hidden cave. Herb, who had not been invited, knew nothing of the knights' scheme. Meathook spoke. My friends, the knights are planning a hunt. We'll be ready for them, won't we? And in answer, dragons' tails pounded the earth and floor, and the cave shook with the sound of thundering evil voices. We'll singe 'em and fry 'em, boil 'em in a pot, stew 'em, the whole juicy lot. No, bellowed Meathook. We shall disappear. Stay hidden in our caves. Wait them out, and then we shall attack, and then you can sing your songs. The dragons roared their approval of his plan, and their fiery tongues lashed the roof of the huge cave. As this was happening, Herb was cooking a new soup made of butter, leeks, onions, and potatoes. He smiled, licking his lips. Very tasty. I must give it a name. Herb's famous lake water veggie slurp. Herb didn't realize that he was in danger, that when the knights set out, he would be the only dragon to be seen in all of Nogard Forest. That evening, 100 knights in groups of 4 set forth on their hunt, each heading in a different direction. For 7 days and 7 nights they searched, but not a dragon was to be seen. Then, on the last day of the hunt, a group heading west saw a dragon in the distance. They knew just what to do. Herb was hoeing in his garden, quite unaware that he was being surrounded on all sides. As he bent to pull out a difficult weed, the knights pounced. Herb's blue flame was powerless against the chain mail mesh of their nets. His wings strained uselessly against the ropes as he was dragged away by his tail. "What have I done?" thought Herb. "Won't somebody tell me?" But he couldn't speak because his jaws were bounded tightly with rope. One of Meat Hook's spy dragons watched from a distant peak and then glided silently away to report what he had seen. The king ordered Herb to meet his fate at dawn in the jaws of the hungry alligators in the moat. From his small, dank, iron-barred cell, Herb could hear their horrid snapping sounds and see the wooden plank he would walk to meet his doom. Suddenly he heard a voice. "Psst! Herb, you ridiculous excuse for a dragon. I have a last offer to make. We've decided to help you. I've got a dozen dragons here ready to tear down this jail and get you out. We ask only one thing in return." "What is it?" asked Herb. "I'll do anything to save my life." "Take this," hissed Meat Hook as he thrust his scaly fist up against the bars. "What's this?" asked Herb. "It's wild boar meat. Eat it and become one of us. It's a small price to pay for your freedom," he gloated, "as I'm sure you will agree." "Thanks, but no thanks," Herb said. "I don't see it your way, so I'll take my chances. I don't ask you to stop eating meat, so why do you ask me to stop eating vegetables?" "Fool," Meat Hook muttered as he flew off into the darkness. "You can't be different in the..." Hundreds of people crowded around the castle moat as Herb was dragged from his cell. A rope held his jaws shut. A huge man with a long pole stepped forward. "For the crimes of burning, stealing, and murdering, and to serve as an example for all who would dare to repeat these actions, this evil dragon will walk the plank and be devoured by the king's alligators for all to behold." The crowd roared its approval. A drummer rolled his sticks as Herb was pulled to his feet at the water's edge. As Herb, being pushed from behind, reached the very end of the plank, with only one single second before he would drop into the swirling waters of death, a tiny voice cried out, "Wait!" The drumming stopped. A little girl ran down the plank and grasped the pole as Herb teetered at the edge, and the alligators waited their meal. "This dragon is my friend. His name is Herb. I have watched him tend his vegetable patch. I have played with him, and never once has he tried to harm me. He only eats vegetables. You must spare his life." "Stop!" cried Bernard the Bold as he approached the girl. "How do we know what you say is true?" The little girl dragged Herb back by his tail and climbed up his scales. Before anyone could stop her, she released the ends of the rope that held his jaws closed, and they snapped open with a rush of blue flame as she perched on his head. "Nicole, get down from there!" shouted a man. "It's all right, father," said Nicole. And then she climbed right into Herb's mouth and sat there with only her legs dangling free. Herb gulped and tried to smile. "See, now do you believe me?" cried Nicole. "He wouldn't harm anyone." As the awe-struck crowd stared up at her, the silence was broken by a loud crash. Meat Hook, who was spying on the proceedings, had fallen out of his tree-top hiding place. He lay helpless on the ground, his wings entangled in a mass of branches. At once 12 knights sprang forward and bound him with ropes. "That's one of the meat-eaters," shouted the little girl as she climbed out of Herb's mouth. "Feed them both to the gators," someone yelled. "Stop," commanded the king. "There is an opportunity here. If we kill these dragons, we risk an all-out war, and many will lose their lives. You," the king said, pointing to Herb. "The child says you are a vegetarian. By your word as a dragon, is that true?" "It is, your highness. I'm an herbivore." "And you, whatever your name is," the king continued. "Meat Hook," said Meat Hook, puffing up his chest. "I am a meat-eater, a carnivore, like my father and grandfather before me." "Very well, Meat Hook. I give you a choice. I will not ask you to change your eating habits. It is your rightful choice to eat what you will. But in exchange for sparing your life, I ask that you and your dragon brothers stop feasting on my people. Stop your burning and stealing and live in peace as Dragon Herb has done." "But dragons have always burned and pillaged and devoured knights and princesses. It's what we do. We can't change." "No law has the power to change habits," the king replied. "Only you have the power to change what you are." "We can all live in peace if we want to," said Herb. "Release them," commanded the king. "Dragon Herb and Dragon Meat Hook, I expect your answer by the day's end." In the hidden cave, all the dragons of Nogard met to hear of the king's offer. "It's a trick to de-dragon us," shouted one. "Better than endless war, isn't it?" shouted another. "It's not as if we have to become vegetarians like Herb. We just have to give up eating people," said a large dragon from the rear. "Live in peace with people? I can't imagine it," said another. "I wouldn't mind having a nice garden like Herb has," said one of the younger dragons. "And I'll help you if you like," offered Herb. "I'll give you some seeds and show you how to sow and reap." "We must vote on it," announced Meat Hook. "Now." Then all of the dragons voted, and the result of that vote is recorded in the history books of Nogard. And even to this day, the story is told of how Herb, the vegetarian dragon, brought peace to the forest of Nogard, where dragons and people, meat-eaters and vegetarians, live together in peace and harmony. Okay, now that we're finished the book, let's do the post-reading questions. Again, you're going to need to pause the video while you talk about the questions and answer them, and then restart the video to get to the next question. I'm going to do all the questions first, and then at the end I'll go back and do the questions and give you some answer suggestions, and we'll see if we had the same sort of answers. Okay, question 1. How is Herb different from the other dragons in the story? Why did the knights hold a meeting? Why did Meat Hook, the dragon, ask Herb to eat wild boar meat before he would free him? How did Nicole, that's the little girl, how did she prove that Herb was different? Why did Meat Hook and the other dragons struggle with the choice not to eat the people of the castle? We read the book W.I.T.S before. How are Herb and Wadney different or the same? How is their problem similar? How did they handle their problem? And how did both characters change? If you haven't done Hooray for Wadney Wat with me on video, then you can skip that question. Last question. There's a line in the story that states, "You can't be different in the dragon world and survive." Do you agree? Can people change? Okay, here's the questions again. This time I'll put in some answers and see if you got similar answers. How is Herb different from the other dragons? Well, he lived peacefully and alone, and he tended a garden and ate vegetables, and he did not eat the people of the castle. Why did the knights hold a meeting? They wanted to stop the dragons from eating their people. Why did Meathook ask Herb to eat wild boar meat before he would free him? He wanted Herb to be like them before he would help them. How did Nicole, the little girl, prove that Herb was different? Well, remember, she climbed up on his scales and onto his head to prove that he was not dangerous. Why did Meathook and the other dragons struggle with the choice not to eat the people of the castle? Well, the dragons thought it might be a trick to de-dragon them, to make them no longer like dragons. All right, I won't provide answers for question 6 about Hawaii the Wadni-Rat and or question 7 about you can't be different in the dragon world and survive. Those answers you have to come up with on your own. Okay, thanks for joining me.